In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Tonight, as we continue our discussion in Proverbs, we're going to talk about Proverbs on business principles. I had intended originally to conclude our discussion of Proverbs tonight, but I'm going to extend for another month. We're going to go into January. There's at least 4 more topics that I want to get in our study before I let it go, so we're going to go a little bit farther. And this evening on business principles, I hope that we'll have several things that will interest you. Economics 101. All business is one thing with 2 parts. What one thing is all business about? Well, I guess we could describe it as, first, it is providing something of value, either goods or services. If you're in business, that's what you're in business to do. There is something that you are doing for another person. But that's just part one. The second part is that you're providing goods and services in return for something of value. Usually that's money, but not always. So we sometimes have a bartering arrangement where you do something for someone and you trade out. But typically, our relationship with business is we trade and we use that money as the bartering tool. And so we get something of value, we give something of value, and hopefully we can use that to do what we want. Goods are anything that we purchase that is something that we hold or use. It would include houses, clothes, cars, whatever you think of at Walmart, except perhaps if you were going to the automotive center, they might do services for you. But everything else, when you go to a store, typically you are buying goods. Services would be involved with nearly everything else in life. And nearly everyone in this room is a service provider at some level. If you are employed, chances are you're a service provider. Unless you own your own business and you are a manufacturer, then you're involved in some level of service as an engineer, an architect, a teacher, a construction worker, whatever. And we could describe all of those things. So for that reason, when we think about business, we're all involved in business. Everyone, either as a buyer or a seller or both, is involved. If you've got a job, you're in business. Now, you may not think of your job as part of a business. You may feel like you're just going and doing something for someone, but you really are a business person. If you have a job, you're in sales. Do you think you're in sales? You say, well, I'm not in sales. I go and, my job's a teacher. I don't sell anything. But you do. You see, if you have a job, the product you're selling is yourself. Someone is paying you for your time or your experience, your skills, your knowledge, your personality, perhaps your looks, or some other aspect. They are buying that from you. And as long as you continue to provide your goods and or services at an appropriate level, your employer, who is your customer, will continue to purchase those things from you. If, on the other hand, the quality of your services or goods begin to deteriorate, where your employer does not feel like what he or she is getting from you is of sufficient quality, they may decide not to buy from you anymore. You could lose your job. The concept of business is around us, it's in us. And the quality of what we do affects our future. You're in the loop. You are a purchaser. You're a service provider. If you make anything, you're also a manufacturer. Tonight, I'm going to look at about 13 basic principles of business ideas that are found in the book of Proverbs. And that's a little challenging for us to get to in the time allotted, so we'll hasten right along. Number 1, commit yourself to God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. What does that have to do with business? Chapter 16, verse 3 says, commit your works to the Lord, your thoughts will be established. When we commit ourselves to God, we have a basic principle that's established, and that is that our relationship with others is guided by our commitment first to God. If we commit ourselves to God, God promises that certain things will happen for us or to us, that He'll watch out for us, that the laws that He has put in place will work to our benefit. And so if you commit yourself to God, there are a lot of things that you will not face in the area of business. Some things you will anyway. But we'll talk about several of these as they come up. The word character can be defined as the degree to which a person adheres to higher values. The character of an individual who is a committed Christian and who is also in business is valuable. I was reading a book a couple of weeks ago, and as I was getting ready for our lesson tonight, and the guy who was talking was giving some personal experiences about his own experiences with Christian institutions. I use that word loosely. He was involved in selling greeting cards and other religious products, and he did it primarily to Christian bookstores and retailers of that sort. And he said, you were dealing with those who would openly claim to be Christians, that you would have a better financial relationship. You would expect things to be paid for on time. You would expect for shipments to be acknowledged and for there to be an appropriate business dealing. And he said, you would be wrong to assume, in his experience, that those who called themselves Christians actually had Christian ethics when they did business. I knew a guy several years ago who was writing tracts, and he was sending them out to churches, and I mean churches of Christ. And he said to me one time, our brethren sometimes almost act like crooks. He said he had shipped things to people that they refused to pay. He has signed shipment orders where they refused to acknowledge that they even got the shipments. He said they were continually late. He had to turn some over to collections. Said it was obvious that when people came to business, even though they called themselves Christians, they did not function like them. From a standpoint of our service to God, the very first thing we're going to need to do is recognize we have a greater service to render. And I hope that your employer realizes that you are a quality employee, that those who provide services to you, that you're a quality vendor. Those who get your stuff, that you're a quality provider. Number 2, plan your work. The plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty. Any of you ever built a house in here or were involved in house building? A few hands. How did you start out building your house? Did you walk out in the yard with a shovel and start digging a hole and say, you know, this looks like a good spot right here? Probably not. Long before you got to that spot, you had some plans drawn out. You understood, here's the shape of the house, Here's how big it's going to be. Here are the rooms I want. These are the qualities it's going to have. Here's what I'm going to do with it. And because you plan out those things, then when you start getting involved in the construction process, the process itself well. If you've been involved in construction, you understand that the better off your planning is, the longer you're able to see down the road, the more things you're able to pick up. A lot of people have found themselves halfway into a house and say, man, I wish I'd have done this. If only we had added a couple of feet here or a couple of things here, we'd have room for this extra closet, or we could have put our plumbing over here, or whatever. The better off we plan, the better off our lives will be. The plans of the diligent lead to one who's hasty to poverty. Solomon tells us, think about what you're going to do. Decide where you're going to go before you ever get there, and plan it out. I've been reading a book by the name of Something for Nothing by Brian Tracy. And I've been on again, off again for about a year. Interesting little book. One of the things that he describes in the book is the better a person is at looking long term and planning out their future, the better decisions they'll make in regard to those plans. And he illustrates that by saying, if you're walking along and you're peeking through a keyhole and all you can do is just see like 3 or 4 feet in front of you, you can function and keep from stepping into buckets of nails or whatever, but you really can't go very far. On the other hand, if you're able to, with a pair of good binoculars, look up and really scan ahead of you, then you can make a lot better decisions about where you're going to go. How well do you plan? I'm not going to belabor that. Number 3, seek and accept advice. And there are several little notes about this one. Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. In a multitude of counselors, there is safety. Listen to counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your latter days. Plans are established by counsel. By wise counsel, wage war. Now, you're not interested in waging war, I'm sure. I'm not trying to get into a debate, but in theory, the President of the United States would be one of the most important positions in our country and would require certainly one of the greatest decision-making functions that is around us. The president surrounds himself traditionally with a number of people who are dedicated to providing specific information on one area of information that the president needs to know about. And there will be a number of people involved in economics and defense and contact with foreign relations in various ways. And there are specialists who provide information to him on a regular basis. It may someday be a her who fills that role. Solomon embraces that. The Proverbs speak to the fact that there is a value to people collaborating and cooperating in the decision-making process. Now, sometimes it's a case where when you involve several people in a decision-making of any kind, it's more work. It's harder to do, and that's a fact. If you've got 2 people who have to make a decision, you have to wrap up all of their ideas and wants and wishes and whatever. If you've got 10 people, you've got that many more. But those 10 people also have 10 lives of experience, and they have 10 different ways of looking at something. And 10 people are going to see things about life that are different than you do. Even if you don't agree with them, if you decide not to follow them, good advice is valuable. In Acts chapter 15, the early church came to a situation where they had a problem. And rather than it being something that anyone themselves tried to solve, Paul and Barnabas said, we're going to go up to the apostles in Jerusalem, and we're going to talk about this. And all the apostles met in Acts chapter 15 to solve a problem that the church had. They all got together, they talked about it, Each person gave their point of view. There were some summary statements, and they came up with an option on what to do. There are a lot of people who may find themselves in positions of leadership who are reluctant to ask for advice or counsel for a variety of reasons. Maybe we don't ask more. And from a personal standpoint, our lives would be better in a lot of ways if we would allow other people to help influence our decisions. We may not want to tell other people about things about our lives because we may not know who we can trust. It may feel like they're very personal kinds of information we simply wouldn't reveal to someone. It may be that we don't believe there are competent people around us that we really can lay our information out for. We may not want to pay for that if you think of a professional situation. We may want more control over it, and if you ask somebody else for advice, you may, make them mad or whatever. Nonetheless, seek advice. Plan out in advance. You'll make better progress. Number 4, work. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to want. After you've made your plans, then it's time to do something about it. If all you do is sit around and make good plans, that's great as far as it went. But until you actually engage those plans, it's just a theory. You got to put it to work. And work is something that increasingly people apparently don't want to do. He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers by labor will increase. The Scriptures speak to us and say there is a time for us to get out and work. Robert Rector is the director of the Heritage Foundation, and he published an article some time back which had a very interesting statistic in it. Now, would you imagine that those who get paid more work more or work less? Years ago, I had a friend, scratch that, years ago I had an associate who was wanting to get involved in his own business. And his statement was, I am sick and tired of working so hard and working for somebody else. I want control over my own life. So he went into business for himself. Guess how well the business did? It did badly. Do you know why it did badly? He assumed that when he got to be the boss, he could work less. And what it really required was, when he got to be the boss, he worked 23 hours a day for almost no pay. And he didn't want to do that. And so it wasn't too long until he decided, I'm going back to something else. And so he got out. Mr. Rector's statement: the top 20% of wage earners work 5 times more than the bottom 20%. The top 20% of wage earners work 5 times more than the bottom 20%. You talk to people who are successful in business and successful in their work, and they are not taking month-long vacations sailing around the world. They are working to make their businesses work. Now, there comes a time, hopefully, when you are successful enough and you have enough energy invested in your circumstances that maybe you can take off. But a lot of people want to see how little work they can do. Scriptures point to the fact that that's the wrong way to go. Working and working more and working harder provides for an increase in your life. Let's put it on the other side. Let's assume that you are a business owner and you are looking for an employee to advance in your company. And it's going to mean a responsible position, and it means a raise in pay, and it is very important to you as a business person. Who are you going to want to give that job to? The person who you know only works as much as they have to get it done, or are you going to be interested in promoting the person who works themselves silly in your behalf? And you already know the answer to that question. You're going to advance the person who works hard. You're going to advance the person who shows up early, who stays late, who stays on the job, who accomplishes what they should do, who always finishes their work, who does good work, who cares about the company. That's the kind of person you're going to take care of. Okay? What kind of person are you? Are we? If we expect to succeed, then it's important for us to work for those who provide for us. I read a statement that said children begin to lie early in life and to deceive others because it is the easiest way to get what they want. Well, if that's all we're after is the easiest way, then we're in trouble. Number 5. Strive for excellence. Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. Highly skilled people are driven by something internal. Now, there's a difference in planning your work and working for excellence. Excellence means that you are not satisfied to do anything less than the absolute best that you are capable of doing on every job. And that shows. And people who are excellent at what they do get advanced. They are hired to better positions. They go up in companies. They are the individuals that somebody's looking for. And if you want to make more of who you are, strive for excellence. Number 6, stay hungry. Need is a good motivator. The person who labors for himself. His hungry mouth drives him on. Dale Carnegie said this: there is only one way to get anybody to do anything, and that is by making the other person want to do it. There's only one way to make anybody do anything. You've got to make them want to do it. You say, no, that's not true. You can force people to do things. Yeah, you can a little bit. You can threaten to fire them, and that'll motivate them a little, but it's a begrudged motivation. They may also end up sabotaging your work or not doing a good job when you're not looking. That's not the best motivator. The greatest motivator is for a person who really wants to do something for you. And that person, it has to have something that's coming back to them. And the person who's hungry, I want it, I'm after it, let me have an opportunity for it, that is what drives us on. There are a lot of interesting stories that happen about people who either inherit a lot of money, that doesn't happen all that often, or who win a lottery. And there are some really tragic stories about lottery winners. In fact, so much so that they've come up with the phrase, the curse of the lottery winner. And there are a lot of things that happen to people in their life when they suddenly have a lot of money. Not just the family and friends, but people say, why are you still working? Why would you work? If you had all the money you wanted, and all the money perhaps you could spend for the rest of your life, would you continue to work? You might say, well, no, I wouldn't work. I'd quit my job. I'd go on a vacation. I'd buy a big house. I'd do whatever you'd fill in the blank for. And a lot of the value of your life would then evaporate, because what drives us and motivates us as people is the fact that I've got to work to take care of my needs. And that also is a satisfying thing in the book of Ecclesiastes, but we'll hopefully get to that at some point in time. Number 7. Back up one more thought while I'm still on that one. God told Adam in Genesis chapter 3:19, by the sweat of your brow you will eat bread. Is that a motivator? If you don't work, you don't eat. Number 7, accept the cost of doing business. I love this verse. Where no oxen are, the trough is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of an ox. Does that immediately make sense to you? Any of you ever raised horses, cows, sheep, any other animal that was ever put in a barn? What happens to the barn when you keep a cow or a horse inside? Okay, cows not so much, horses. It makes a mess. And you have to clean it up. You have to clean out the stall, and you have to put in new hay, and you have to haul off the manure, and you have to provide for feed. And it'd be a lot less work to just not have the horse. Right. But then you don't get as much done either. The cost of doing business says that there are some things that I'm going to do, and there are going to be some things that are going to tie up some resources in order to do it. I'm going to buy a bigger truck in order to do a job, but now I'm going to have to pay increased insurance. I'm going to have a greater gas cost. I may have greater expenses in maintenance and this sort of thing, but it'll be worth it because I can do this much more work with that big truck or a tractor or a whatever. There's a cost to doing business, and there are things that we're going to be involved in our lives. There's an easier way to do something if we want to avoid some of the trouble. It's not as common as it once was, but a lot of people still moonlight. Either privately, they have a hobby-type job where they do crafts or some sort of manufacturing or some service on the side or something. Well, wouldn't it be a lot less effort to not do all of that? Yeah, it would. Don't you have to provide a lot of tools and specialty stuff and take a lot of your time and effort out? Yes, it does. Why do you do that? Because I want what comes from it. Proverbs. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. What does it mean to be strong? The concept of strong, as opposed to weak, is something that is strong, doesn't quit, it doesn't break, it doesn't stop, it keeps going. On the other hand, something that's weak, it breaks, it quits, it stops, it doesn't function in some way. If we test ourselves and if we quit when it gets hard, when it gets difficult, then we're not strong. Strong pushes through the difficulties. Several years ago, when I was teaching a marriage and family class at Faulkner over on the campus here, I had a question in one of my tests. And the question was, even strong marriages fail when they have problems. And I'd have a bunch of students who would put yes to that. It was a true-false question, and we'd already discussed the issues in class. False. Strong marriages don't fail when you have problems. That's the whole definition of a strong marriage. Strong people don't quit when they have problems. They keep going. We have an old wives' tale or a phrase that we use that when the going gets tough, you fill it in. The tough get going. Okay, so we're going to determine the real test of any team is how are you going to handle it when it is really hard? Let me make a 20-second application to church life. It's one thing for a church to look good and for everything to go along fine when all is well and there are no issues to be dealt with. It's another for a church to do fine when there are issues that come up, when there are problems that happen, when there are difficulties that must be overcome. And that's when you find out about the real strength of something. You find out about the strength of an employee when difficulties come into their lives. You find out about the strength of a business when the economic times come along. You find out about the strength of a person when they run into trouble in their lives and they've got to overcome some things. What are you? Don't be a quitter. Number 9. We've gone through the positives. I've got about 3 or 4 negatives here that I want to put in. Number 1 was don't give up. Number 2, don't rejoice in the failure of others. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. I think there is a very common response to people who enjoy the adversity that comes upon those that they don't like or that they feel are enemies in some way. And I'm sure you've heard this saying made by someone at some point in time where some calamity happened to an individual and their life got roughed up by something, and you may have said or may have heard someone say, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Don't rejoice when your enemy falls. There's an interesting personality trait that enjoys the pain and suffering of other people, and it's not an admirable one. People who enjoy others' suffering, there's something wrong with them. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44, bless them that curse you. Do good to them who use you, persecute you, do all manner and say all manner of evil against you. The concept that Jesus taught was you do good to other people, not even to those who may be competing with you. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 21 and 2, I don't have that on my thing, I don't think, says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For so you will heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Now, Paul's going to quote from that passage in the book of Romans and talk about how we ought to treat those who are around us. There's a cute little movie. I don't remember if it's a Pixar movie or whatever. It's a little cartoon called Cars. Some of you have seen it, I'm sure. Of course, all the characters are caricatures of cars brought to life. So you have this little car, and he's a hot rod. He's a race car. Don't remember his name. Doesn't matter. Somebody, you're probably thinking it right now. What's his name? Lightning, yeah. Anyway, his whole interest is in the Piston Cup. He wants to win the Piston Cup. He gets broken down in some little old town, and I can't go through the whole story. But anyway, he finds an old beat-up car who's had a couple of Piston Cup wins already. He learns a lot about himself and life and different things. Finally gets back to civilization, gets to run in the race, and he's just about to win the race that he's always wanted to win. He's about to win the Piston Cup. And flashes up on the screen, the old car that has been around forever has just spun out in the infield, and he's out of the game, out of the race. And now this little hot rod car has decided there's something more valuable than just winning. And he stops, doesn't cross the finish line, goes back and pushes the old car across the finish line first. Of course, you can imagine what the crowd does. They go wild. And there's a bittersweet moment there where you go, oh, he lost it. He was so close. It's something he wanted so badly, and he didn't get there. But then there's something so much more fulfilling as he swallows his pride, and he's behind the old car, and he's coming in last, and he pushes him across. And later in the story, somebody says there's more to winning than just being first. Real winners do not cheer when other people have trouble. Period. There's that verse, I just read it. It's not on my notes, but it was on my slide. All right, number 10. Don't be or hire lazy. He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer. The slothful one. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 30. I went by the field of the lazy man, by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. Its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. So shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. The story here, the imagery is, I went by a place and it was overgrown and it was obvious the person who lived there was lazy. They weren't doing their business. Lazy looks bad. You don't want to be lazy. You don't want to hire lazy people. Lazy employees don't do a good job. Your business will suffer. Those who interact with you will be terrible. I want to read you a quote. It is the internal struggle between two principles, right and wrong. They have stood face to face from the beginning of time and will ever continue to struggle. It is the same spirit that says, you work, toil, and eat bread, and I'll eat it. You work, toil, and earn bread, and I'll eat it. You know who said that? Abraham Lincoln. As he was talking about the constant struggle of those who want something but don't want to do anything for it. They want somebody else to take care of them. A motivational speaker by the name of Dennis Waitley said this: successful people prefer activities that are goal-achieving. Unsuccessful people prefer activities that are stress-relieving. The concept there is the person who really succeeds in life, they are driven, they look for things, and when they take time off, they're still involved in stuff. People who don't, they're looking to get out of work. They want to relax and kick back, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with sitting on the porch with a glass of tea, but too much of that can be a problem. Number 11, be honest. Whoever is partner with a thief hates his own life. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. It is good for nothing, cries the buyer, but when he has gone his way, then he boasts. Those are three great proverbs. If you link up with somebody who steals, you're in trouble as well. If you sell or if you're involved in cheating, you're dishonest in how you get your gain, that's going to come back to you, and it's also against God. I don't know if you watch any television, and if you do, what's on the History Channel? No? Yes? 45 on my television dial, I think, is they have a show occasionally called Pawn Stars. Interesting little show, at least it is sometimes. What's interesting is sometimes they'll have a guy come in with some product or some object, and the pawn shop is buying it. But the guys who are buying the material usually run it down. Well, you know, this has got a chip in it, and this is broken, and this is missing a part. But sometimes they'll actually interview the guy before they've actually made the deal. And so a guy's sitting there going, man, I can't wait to get this thing. If I'm really stoked or I'm pumped, if I can get that, I can really make a great profit. But then he's out there ready to buy it, and he's going, I'm not sure I can make any money off of this. And, that's dishonest. Now, I'm not in the pawn shop business, and I'm not knocking a show necessarily. I think it's good entertainment sometimes, but if you're selling something and somebody comes up and says, you got a piece of junk here, and it's not worth anything, and you sell it to them at a cut rate price because you're convinced it's no good, and then they go out and say, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, and they sell it for a high price, they've robbed you. It's good for nothing, cries the buyer, but when he's gone away, he boasts. That's something that's been going on a long time. Be honest. Number 12, be honorable. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. How do you want people to talk about you? The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. A poor man is better than a liar. There's an honorableness. William Shakespeare said, he who steals my purse steals trash. A good name steals everything. I've got one more slide. Those of you who need to move and go, please feel comfortable to do so. And I'll finish this. Number 13, be reliable. Whoever falsely boasts of giving is like clouds and wind without rain. Even a child is known by his deeds, whether what he does is pure and right. The first one, Proverbs 25:14. You probably at some point in your life have been around people who will easily commit to helping you do something or will provide something, and then for some reason whatsoever that they don't come through with it. I've had some people in the past that I've had dealings with. You plan a project or something and you really need some help. You say, would you help me with this? And oh yeah, be glad to help you with that. Or I can provide you this and this and this. Okay. And then they don't. You say you're going to do something and you don't come through, that's like a farmer watching the clouds waiting for the rain and it doesn't come. Be honest. Be reliable. Commit to God, plan your work, seek and accept advice. You can read the rest. 13 business principles for Proverbs. These will be on the web, on our website if you want to go over the things again. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a Merry Christmas. Lord willing, we'll continue our study in Proverbs next Wednesday night. Thank you.